Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 9th Board of Selectmen's meeting. I'll read the agenda. 7 o'clock, citizens input. 7:05, introduction and new executive assistant, Pam Rico. 7:10, Mark Furnick, Reverend Edward M. Cardoza, Historical Commission. 7:15, Lloyd Gibbs, Marshall Lewicki, Council on Aging and Human Services Advisory Board. 7:20, Bob Correa, Linda Walsh, Annual Report, CSAAC. 7:40, CRGE, Foxborough LLC, DBA, Toby Keith's I Love This Bar and Grill. We're going to scratch that item from the agenda. That'll be moved to our January 23rd meeting. That is to appoint a new manager. 8 p.m. meeting room policy. 8:10 Selectmen's update. 8:20 Town Manager update. 8:30 Assistant Town Manager update, followed by action items. Ginny, you want to lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anybody here for citizens input? Dennis, you want to come up to the podium?
Oh, yes, sure. Thank you.
Just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dennis Norton, and I live at 4 Everett Lane here in town. And before I begin, I would just like to thank the members of the board, the volunteers. Probably don't get thanked that often for doing the volunteer job that you do, so
Thank you.
just want to recognize that. I'm here to speak about the item on the agenda tonight on the room use policy, which comes up later on the agenda.
Do you want to just hold it until we discuss it on the agenda?
You know, I'd be happy to do that. I just wanted to make sure that there would be allowed adequate time to speak to it then, as opposed to now.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. That's what I'll do.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much.
Purpose is to have input tonight, so.
Yeah. Yep. Anybody else for citizens input? State your name.
Good evening. My name is Charles DePompo of 96 Main Street, D8, and I also would like to speak on the policy regarding the rooms, and,
Okay.
you know, I would reserve until...
Yep, there'll be time
Okay,
during that meeting.
Thank you.
Anybody else for citizens input? Okay. Bill, you want me to turn this over to you to introduce Pam?
Sure. Now that I can't get my computer to work here, but
Come on up to the table, Pam.
Yeah, come on up, Pam. You can take, just have a seat right there at the table. That's fine. Okay. So I'm pleased to introduce Pam Riccio, who is our newest executive assistant in the office. Pam has been with the town for several years. Many of you would probably remember her as the assistant town clerk. She was promoted, this was an internal promotion to our office to serve as our chief administrative support person in the office. And she brings with her a whole lot of skill sets that we certainly have been looking for quite some time, and also to enhance even further the work that Marcia did, her predecessor, who did such a terrific job for us. So we think that Pam will fit the need quite nicely, actually, because she brings not only the ability of understanding the town's needs, but also is a paralegal, has a lot of understanding about legal documents, and can actually advise us on things before we even see them. So it's really nice to be able to have that skill set. And she is very knowledgeable about the town's residents as a whole. So I am very pleased to announce and to introduce to you Pam Riccio as our new executive assistant. So, Pam?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, very complimentary. I just want to say that I am thrilled to be serving as the executive assistant for the town of Foxborough and to work for Bill and Mary Beth. And I'm excited to work with Sarah and Kate as well, and just to be part of the team. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I will just add, too, that she is one member of Team Riccio, who we'll meet the second half at the next meeting. It's quite unique because actually her husband, Nick Riccio, has just became our new building
I
commissioner.
never put two and
Never
two
put two
together.
together. So we're actually very pleased. Nick is actually an attorney. So the two of them, between the two of them, we should have enough legal advice between the two of them in the same building. But Nick is actually, it brings a whole lot of experience, having worked in Foxborough, in Mansfield, and in Rentham as a building commissioner for almost 25 years. Also served at one time as an interim town manager, and has done a terrific job. He's considered by many to be one of the top building commissioners in the state. So I'm very pleased to have him aboard as to fill the shoes of a guy who I have a tremendous amount of respect of, in Bill Caspara, who left us this past week in retirement. So we're very pleased to have Nick as the other part of Team Riccio. So thanks, and we'll introduce him to the next meeting. So you can go back up if you want. You don't need to stay. Okay, thanks, Pam.
Good luck, Pam.
Through the chair, if I could just also make a comment. I wanted to also thank Lisa Plant, who had stepped in with a sudden, leaving of our other executive assistant. Lisa Plant came in as a temp, and she's kept the ship running for us through months of licensing and all of that, and was a great team player. We couldn't have gotten through the day-to-day without her. And Pam is such a wonderful addition to our department. We're thrilled to have her. And she rose to the top. We had over 200 applicants, and Pam, we were thrilled. She made some of the strongest candidates, she had the edge on them because she already knew our process. And it's a wonderful thing when we can promote from within, because in the town clerk's office, it allowed somebody else to promote into Pam's job. So it was a good process all around.
Good. Okay, 7:10, Mark Farnick, Reverend Edward Cardoza, Historical Commission. You guys want to come up?
Good evening. I'm Mark Forensic, Chairman of the Historical Commission, and we are very pleased and honored to have Father Ed Cardoza agree to join our commission. He really doesn't need any introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He's the rector of St. Mark's Church. He's the co-founder of Still Harbor, which trains people to help make a kinder, more equitable, and sustainable world. He's a board member and director of Partners in Health, a fellow of Canterbury Cathedral in England, has been involved in several historical restorations, including St. John's Seminary Chapel in Brighton and many other churches. He's currently working on many other projects involving reuse of closed churches and monasteries. So as you can see, we are extremely fortunate to have him wish to join the commission.
Excellent.
Do you have any, he still want us to tell you anything else? but
Sure.
You'll have to grill him.
Well, I guess I'd be very pleased to join the commission. I have enjoyed coming here to Foxborough. I'm very happy to also have had the chance to move here. So I'm a resident now of Beach Street, and I'm very interested in preserving the historic fabric of the town at a time when we have lots of projects coming up, and we need to find that balance between development and taking care of our older homes.
Anybody have an?
Yeah, just a couple comments. First, I want to say you're one of the most respected reverends in the town. Bill Dudley back there. I had the pleasure of having breakfast with Father Ed, specifically to talk about historic preservation in the town, and I know, Mark, you would send an email to the board. I'm not sure what response you got, but it is an issue for a lot of people, the older homes getting knocked down, for the McMansion-type buildings going up. I hope you do have strength and wrap your arms around that, and I know you have history of it, and you've worked in that area, but Foxborough is going in that direction, and it's tear to a lot of people's eyes when the old houses get knocked down. When they come to the Selectmen, we say it's not a jurisdiction. You go to the planning board, it's not the jurisdiction. You end up at the historic commission, but your hands are tied because you get the demolition bylaw, and you basically put a delay and then watch it happen. You could use more resources, you could use more bylaws, and anything to strengthen that your committee, I think would be very helpful to the town. So, welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, you have anything, Jenny?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, welcome aboard. So do we have to officially vote it, or?
Yes?
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Move to appoint Reverend Edward M. Cardoza as an associate member on the Foxborough Historic Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, welcome aboard.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Next up, we have Lloyd Gibbs and Marsha Lewicki, Council on Aging and Human Services Advisory Board.
Good evening. I'm Lloyd Gibbs, Chairman of the Council on Aging Board. I live at 2 Margaret Road in Foxborough. I'm here in support of Marsha to join our board. We had a unanimous vote 2 weeks ago to have her fill in Betty Travis's remainder of her term, which is until next year, August of the 19. And so just as a support, Marsha is very active as a volunteer at the senior center. She's been doing that for a number of years. So when the opening came, she volunteered. She said she'd like to help us and be on our board. So that's what we're here for. Nancy Stockwell is with me tonight, also a member of the board, and just to show the support. So for your consideration.
Very good. You want to say a few words, Marsha?
Just that I'm very pleased to be asked to be on the board, and that I will work to the best of my ability, and I enjoy the senior center very much. I think they do a lot of good things.
Anybody have anything to?
We haven't met, but I welcome.
Yeah, thank you for volunteering. Make a motion, Doug?
Move to approve Marsha Lewicki as a new member of the Council on Aging and Human Services Advisory Board with a term ending in May 2019.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good luck.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thanks, Lee.
Next up, we have Bob Correa and Linda Walsh, annual report presentation.
Good evening.
Hello.
Bob Correa is not with us this evening. He's had a health issue, so Deb Spinelli, Bill Dudley, and Nancy. You all got our report, I take it. A long report of all the good things that we've done over the past year and will continue to do.
Did you get just the report, or did you get the attachments?
There was from Senator Lovely attachment and,
With the cards and everything?
no, the card wasn't on there.
No.
Oh, it was? Oh, it is?
Well, I brought extra hard
Oh, I see
copies
it.
in
It
case
is,
you
it is,
want
yeah.
them. Okay,
Is that a brand new?
sorry?
Is that new, the card?
Yes. It's listed in one of the accomplishments for this year, so we thought we would give you samples. So I have a few extra in here if people would like that.
That was very good. Gave you a lot of information, very
Right,
precisely.
right.
So
We
I think
figured we'd do
we're-
that as an update,
Yeah.
like every year or so, have something different with different points to point out to people. So it's kind of an addition to our refresher course, so.
So Bob couldn't be here with us tonight, so we thought we'd each offer a little bit on the annual report. We know you've read it. So we did add, I'll just try to hit the highlights, if you will. Our purpose remains the same. The part that we added to the purpose was that we have expanded our outreach to go beyond the community. So we're really looking to have an influence outside of Foxborough. So that's a little bit of a nuance in the change of our purpose. And that's why you see a new goal number 5, which is to influence statewide legislation around child sexual abuse and mandated reporters. So we're trying to get the pebble in the pond to be a little bit wider, if you will. So I'll leave this for a few other people to talk to, but one of the big accomplishments in 2017, this is our 4th year as a committee appointed by you, the Board of Selectmen. And the big thing that happened this year was that we, as you know, last year when we were here, we talked about, we had home rule petition, which is a local petition to expand the definition of mandated reporters for Foxborough. And I think other people will probably be a little bit more eloquent about this. My understanding is the legislature was reluctant to expand a law, if you will, a regulation just for one community. So it kind of, as we put in there, it was a little bit frustrating, but that is sort of out of play at the state level, our local home rule petition. But what's happened, I think, is even better, and I think we all feel that way, is that it has really morphed into a bill. And so that's why we have attached, it was sponsored by Representative Jay Barrows. It's a new House bill, House 77, an act to authorize the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to establish additional mandated reporters for the purpose of protection and care of children. And we attached a copy of the bill for you to see. So it was sponsored by Jay. There was a hearing about a month ago. I wasn't able to attend.
December 5th.
Right. So I don't know if you want to talk about the testimony of some members of our committee along with a few other people, Jim DeVellis, Tony Calcia from the Y, and we neglected in the report, if you just add the name, I'd like to type in, it's Lieutenant Rich Noonan also was present.
Correct.
So,
And we're still just in a state holding pattern on that, or what, in the queue?
The chairman of the third reading committee actually came down, was it February or so, and met with us, said the Democratic leadership was quite interested in doing something like this in our bill. Our bill is kind of clean cut in expanding the definition of mandated reporters, although our research has since shown that 23 states, when you turn 18, you're a mandated reporter no matter who you are. So that might have been an approach we would like, but ours is clean and simple and much more brief than some of the others. So it's still sort of circulating in the committees, but it seems to have a good amount of support. I think we had that impression when we testified.
So when would we see this getting passed? As Linda chuckles.
That's
Do you have any,
good.
Best case
do
scenario.
you have any darts and a calendar? I mean,
Yeah.
the good news is it's not dead.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do think, we think, I know we are sort of optimistic because we're so passionate about this topic, but we do think this has a chance because it is quite logical. There are many people, adults in the community, responsible for the care and protection of children who aren't listed on the state's law about who is a mandated reporter and who has to take training to be,
Right.
qualified to judge when you should report and when you shouldn't. And I think it is pretty straightforward. There is another bill sponsored by another legislator, I think it's on the North Shore somewhere, but it's got a lot more nuances to it, and it was crafted in response to the private school issue that's been in the news the last couple of years about child sexual abuse. So they were targeting initially private schools, although it ended up, I think, all schools, but it's got a lot more pieces to it. Ours is straightforward. It's who should be a mandated reporter. The definition should be larger, and I'll always use the schools as an example. We're all always operating under the impression that it's all public school staff. It's really not. It's the administrators and the teachers. And so we have lots of other people, eyes and ears on our kids every day, in the cafeteria, on school buses, in classrooms as paraprofessionals. And we've always treated them as if they're mandated reporters, and they are in practicality, but they're not under the word of the law. So that's just one example, but there were so many holes in this law when we started to look at it a couple of years ago that we felt that it's I don't know, I just think it's hard to argue that you shouldn't expand it. But I'm sure people may feel differently. We'll see.
And as we did some further investigation about other states, many of the other states, including some that surround us in New England, it's blanketed. It just says everyone is a mandated reporter. And that's, I think, socially, that's how it is. But it's good to have what we do here in town, so as a reminder for everyone to have the eyes on our kids. So, and this year we did about almost 200 more, so that brings us up to just about 2,000 people that we've trained through the program. Those are 4,000 eyes on our kids. So we're pretty happy about that. There is a new training for, as like a refresher type course. It's shorter than the original. So we're gonna get our trainers trained on how to present that and get other people that have already taken the training a couple of years ago, just a refresher course. And as we said, we have these cards, and those will be changing to, just to keep it fresh in everybody's mind, so.
This was our other major accomplishment, if you want to put them in priority order. I think the committee did a really good job trying to decide what's most important to know, that our outreach to the community can't just be the 7 of us talking about it as often as we can to anyone interested or appearing disinterested. So this is one thing I think that we did really well this year is the people on the committee worked really hard to say, what is it that we want to get the outreach? So this is sort of the cliff notes of child sexual abuse, and we have them available in public locations. I personally, you can see the letter in there, every single staff member, regardless of what you do in Foxborough Public Schools, receive this in their mailboxes with my accompanying letter, why it's important, and they're to keep this handy, just like they do emergency response, what to do if the fire alarm is pulled, what to do. So they're to keep this, and it really does succinctly capture what are the signs, what are the possible signs of child sexual abuse, and what should you do, and it's all right there, and it gives people confidence, I think, to know rather than to hesitate. And the 2 things printed under the talents of Linda Walsh, and the logo with the foxes guarding the hen. No, they don't guard hens. What do they guard? The foxes guarding the coop. They don't really guard the coop. But they're guard dogs. We'll go with.
I wouldn't trust them
They're
much.
foxes, though. They're
Glad you didn't use a Wario logo.
But this was designed by our own Foxborough High School students in the graphic design, the advanced graphic design class, where they have they operate as a business and they're a clientele. So Rob Lucas is also on our committee, and I met with them over a year and a half ago, and they designed the logo with the guidance of the committee and what we wanted on it and what we wanted the premise to be. So we've got our kids involved in that, and I think this will be really hard to argue with, that people do need. It doesn't happen that often, so people really do need a go-to set of information. They take the training, then they have this as a reminder, and I think it will be a powerful tool.
Are these in town hall?
Bill, do we have those in town hall?
If we put these here and here, we ought to put some of these.
We should, I've not seen those.
Yeah, this is the first time I saw them was on the
Yeah,
agenda.
first time, yeah.
We certainly
Yeah, if you leave some, we'll
The
leave,
library.
we have lots of places we can leave them.
We've got them in the police station.
We can get some.
We could leave
Yeah.
them
In the
at our
library.
reader table. We
Yeah.
can have them in our office as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody has any suggestions about where else you'd like it, you can just let Linda know, and she's got the
We're also going to try and come
storage.
up with a place where just documents can be picked up about the town itself. Trying to locate that.
Can I put this in perspective? I have a contact friend in New Jersey who's trying to begin Darkness to Light training. He's a youth pastor in a church. He's my son-in-law. So he's reached out to the program to get trainers. He lives probably 45 minutes from New York City. The nearest trainer is 2 hours away. No one in New York City is even a trainer. So we're on the cutting edge of a national thing here that we're promoting, and I think it speaks well of Foxborough that you've supported us and the town has supported us to go forward with this.
And that did start with the National YMCA. So this was first brought to me personally about a year before. This was a local issue. Is a National YMCA initiative, Darkness to Light. So we don't want to, we'd be remiss if we didn't thank Ed Hurley, Tony Calcia, and the Hockomock Area YMCA for bringing this and giving us the opportunity to participate in the National YMCA initiative as well.
Bill, you had mentioned us supporting you. The $2,500 that's budgeted, is that enough? Do you need more? Do you guys have to raise more?
No, it works pretty well for the training. Basically, the only cost to us are the books for the training. My company donated these. We'll continue to do that. And the bills for the trainers themselves, they get paid, what they get paid, but Bill has the budget for us, and that's where it comes out, right out of that. and I don't think we've gone over it any year.
The only thing we might, if ever need more money for, is if we wanted to train more trainers. They go for an all-day program, and it's, I think it's about $600 each.
Yeah, it
But
wouldn't.
so far, we've had our people.
You've had nobody go over the budget. I mean, it's never exceeded that line.
But I think it's because you have a lot of contributors. I mean, the school side, which is the vast majority of people, we pay for all of our own training. I have five trainers in-house. You know,
pay for our
people
own,
do it
too.
while they're on the
Right.
clock, so
You folks have your
we're
own.
self-sustaining.
Yeah.
You have your own now. We have one trainer that's involved with the church organizations. And so I think because other people contribute, it's probably enough. If her company weren't getting these printed, possibly. But, you know, I buy my own training material, well, I did, not as of this week or last week, but.
Somebody will.
Not schools.
Somewhere.
So it's been a great partnership. But, you know, the other thing, I don't know if we mentioned in here, but I think Bill and a few other people in the committee, not me, does a really good job. Where if there's another entity in town or agency, like another church that already does their own training, that's not Darkness to Light, but it's on child sexual abuse and awareness, then they do a really good job vetting it and seeing, does it meet the goals and the basic concepts and topics that we want them? And if it does, then we more or less approve it. Because it doesn't have to be this exact one.
Right.
So that, I think, they do a really good job with saying, you know, we're not going to make everybody start over and reinvent the wheel. If it meets the basic concepts that we feel are necessary to meet this important need, then it's fine. And the same may be true in the future. It may not always be Darkness to Light. Right now, it's the best thing. But the other bill that's being sponsored by other people has a different training in it that could end up being required by the Department of Ed, you know, for educators. So it may change, and as long as that's got a lot in it, I've taken a look at it. It's very similar to this. It's got a lot of in it, a lot of really good stuff in it. So it may not always be Darkness to Light, but for right now, it's the best that we have to offer. But I think they do a really good job vetting the other similar types of training that meet our criteria. Focus areas and objectives for this coming year. You can see what we have there. We want to continue to follow that bill and see what happens with it. Continue our outreach. The code of conduct is something Bob Correa is quite interested in. If we have a universal code of conduct about how people in the workplace should behave, if people really want something like that, we'd be able to at least give them a template, you know, that they can start with. That's about it. We'd like to add 2 more community-based trainers. That's about it. Do you want to do the
So
summary?
we do want to add 2 trainers?
That's what we decided at the December meeting.
I think we already addressed the close of the budget.
Yep.
Questions?
Anybody on the board?
Yeah, a couple comments. I mean, you obviously know how I feel about this committee. One of the nicest thing about this committee is your committee is set up in our bylaw. So you're here because it's mandated by our town bylaw. Not many committees are like that. But the reports that you guys bring, none of them have been boilerplate from the last year and just changed the date. And I've been to the meetings, and there's a lot of discussion and a lot of hard work. And that 2,500 budget, when discussion at the House and Senate, and said the entire town workers have been trained. And I think they asked what the budget was. We presented it was $2,500, and I think their jaws dropped. The stuff that you guys are doing is not, it's just very uncommon to do the work that you're doing, and this is the 4th year. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say after 4 years, Deb Spinelli, you were there from day one, with a group of 7 that were like deer in the headlights. You brought the expertise from your school, the mandated, I didn't know what a mandated reporter was till we started talking, so all of the expertise. And the reason the budget went so far was because your supplies, I remember the reports that were printed and ends up on Deb's desk with I's and T's and everyone rolling their eyes at who gave it to the superintendent to proofread. But the work that you've done for 4 years, it's been phenomenal. And I mean that your work as a superintendent aside, all your volunteer work on this committee has been phenomenal.
You still have 4 original members, Bill, Bob, myself, and
Linda,
Linda.
yep.
4 out of the 7 are still original members. Happy to have Nancy.
Yeah, and every time someone new comes in, it's,
Yep. And
so,
Rob Lucas and Jeff Downs.
Jeff
They're
Downs.
listed at the end of the
yep,
report.
and this goes back to Chief
Oh,
O'Leary,
Jeff's
too.
original.
Yep.
5 of the 7 are
Five, yeah.
original.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, which brings us to, you're transitioned out from superintendent. You'll be transitioning out of this, and
I think so in June. I just think it's right to, I did say I would stay on till June, the end of the school year, make the transition for the new superintendent, Amy, a little bit easier, just to keep one thing on my plate. But in my tenure, you appoint us individually. So I did look at your suggestion, like, when is my term up?
Yeah, they were
It's
all-
still a
they
long
were
time on the
staggered,
term.
yeah.
So I think I will be resigning by the end of June, and then really it should be somebody who's actively working in the schools, because when we have meetings and we say, okay, let's do this, can the schools do that? It really should be somebody who's actively working that can go back and either already know the answer or say yes or no, we did that, how many people. So you should expect to have my letter of resignation. But this is a topic near and dear to my heart, so whatever efforts they're continuing to make, I'm still going to live down the street.
well, sincerely, thank you for the service on this whole committee. So,
I mean, you're not technically on the committee either, but we see you all the time,
yeah,
so.
well, nothing else to do.
But I thank you for the opportunity to serve. It's been an important issue for all children, but particularly for the children of Foxborough, as we all know.
Did you build it into Amy's job description?
Did
you build it into Amy's job description? that
Yeah, she
needs-
knows. I said I could resign for December, or you put on for June, but, the transitions were going really, really well, so whatever few things I can keep for a little bit to see this to a little bit more closure, then that's great. And I'm appointed by you, so it doesn't say the superintendent, it specifically says me. And as we've had other 2 people resign, it is a formal process of being appointed and then tendering a resignation.
Thank you.
Great party the other night, by the way.
Ginny,
Very
So
nice.
far, so good. Week 2 is looking good.
any questions, Ginny?
No, I just want to make a comment about the hearing that you had at the State House. Believe me, when the bill is first introduced and it goes to the first committee, and they say it goes into a study, it's dead. This has gone beyond that.
Right, right,
To the 3rd reading.
right, you said, yeah.
It's the last committee that you have to go through before it goes to the floor.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it was a very powerful hearing.
Yeah.
You guys have done a great job.
Yeah. I
Really
mean,
good.
Jay had said afterwards that there was already talk in the hallway after we got out of the hearing, so it was good
good
news.
sign.
It was good news.
good
Many
sign.
bills are written, but few are closed.
Exactly.
True.
Yeah. So congratulations, you really have done a wonderful job.
Doc, you got anything?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to echo everybody's thanks and everything. It's not an easy thing to do what you guys have been doing, but definitely was needed, and appreciate all of the efforts. Thank you. for
Thank
coming
you.
here tonight.
Pass that along to Bob when you talk to him tonight.
I will. I'll see him tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next was, on the agenda was to change a manager for Toby Keiths, but that's going to get pushed off, as I said, to the January 23rd meeting. So 8 o'clock, meeting room policy. Discuss, vote, meeting room policy. Bill, Mary Beth, you
Sure.
want to talk about
So,
this?
I'm gonna let Mary Beth speak to this as well, but I wanted to just introduce to the board, this is a first review of the board tonight, so we're not asking you to actually vote on this necessarily. It may be my fault for not being clear about that, but what we'd like to do is to present it to you, receive input. I know that because we have a new building and we have several buildings throughout town that have facilities, there's been no clear policy on how we utilize meeting space. And it is not a lot of meeting space, so therefore we need to regulate it properly so that people that, that for the business of the town government can actually be done on a regular basis, but also that the space is available to folks when in fact it's empty and nobody's using it. So this policy does a lot of that. It addresses it specifically, though, for, there are 5 different locations that we're talking about. This does not speak to the schools. It speaks to Town Hall, where there is a Selectmen's meeting room, the room that we're sitting in right now. There is the first floor conference room located down the end of the hallway, and there's another conference room on the second floor at the end of the hallway. The public safety meeting space, which is otherwise known as the McGinty Room, as well as the Council on Aging Senior Center, which is the meeting room that has probably the largest capacity of all the spaces, but at 159 people. So what we've spent during the past several months is to get all the different folks together. There was a subcommittee that was formed. Mary Beth worked on that primarily with those individuals, and the mission was to try and pull together policies that are consistent with other communities. We didn't have to really reinvent the wheel. This is actually the words that we took from other places in many cases, but also one which is consistent and also consistent with the law in terms of how we can actually regulate space. A couple things that are in there which I'm sure will draw some discussion. I actually reached out to Dennis Naughton at one time because Dennis had reached out to me earlier last year to say, if you ever develop a policy, make sure you include me in that discussion because I want to be able to weigh in on it. And so I made a point to call him and make sure that he was here for tonight's discussion. So having said that, this is an opportunity for you to respond back to us, but I'll turn it over to Mary Beth and she can give you some of the more of the media details about the policy itself.
Sure. So as Bill said, this was sort of grown out of some questions that came out of the library and their use of the room. We used them as advisors. When Kate joined us, she came from another community and helped research what she had done in her community. And we had the new town hall in our eyes as we were thinking about this excellent new space that we were going to have. So although Bill mentioned there are 5 rooms we're talking about in this policy, you have to understand that some of them are only during operating hours. So for example, the Selectmen's meeting room, as you know, this can be done after hours. There's a committee or board would have access through the town employee to open this room, and the rest of the building is closed off. During operating hours, we have those 2 small conference rooms that we still schedule. Boards and committees, we use them for internal meetings a lot. The public safety building continues to, they have questions that come up an awful lot, so they wanted to join the conversation. And the COA, their meeting room is usually only used during operating hours as well. They don't have the ability to close their entire building and office off during non-business hours. So if someone were to use the room, they could wander through the whole COA. So we're primarily focused on if there were going to be just public after-hours meetings, it would be this one in McGinty Room. The committee was made up of representatives from library, public safety, town hall, council on aging, and the IT department, because one of the key components for us in an internal scheduling process, we're all using Outlook, is to have a meeting calendar online so we can see when it's busy and when it's not. We can reserve it. There's permissions, so the public safety folks through the chiefs would have access to prioritize who uses the meeting room. Our office would prioritize the town hall meeting rooms, and the Human Services COA director would prioritize the use of that room. So we basically are just stating, what the rooms are, who would have priority if it's a town, board, committee, town employees. Those folks would get first access. And if it's a meeting room used during non-business hours, that we would want a town employee to be present, which is usually on a board or committee. We have a town employee that functions in that role anyway. We ask that people keep the room the way they found it, clean and all of that. And some of the policies we saw online were, if the meeting rooms were used for non-municipal employees, we saw that there were restrictions regarding whether it were private sector or religious groups or political groups. So we tried to speak to that in a gentle way in this policy and look for, throw it out there for everybody's feedback.
So one thing that's of concern, I'll go right to it because this may be of concern to some folks here tonight. Meeting rooms should not be used for political fundraising, campaigning, or solicitations. And there's a reason why that's put in place, and this is actually on the advice of town council, who actually weighed in on this as well. The public spaces, such as the ones that the town council, actually this building, the police department, and the Council on Aging, we're supposed to be politically neutral. So we're not supposed to advocate for any one party, and one party is not supposed to be able to utilize it for that particular purpose. So we're not saying that, we're just saying basically that it's not to be used for political purposes. Having said that, if a congressman, state representative, or the governor, say, wants to come in and provide an informational meeting to the public, general public, which is not for political purposes, obviously they can use this room. There's no limitation on that. It's strictly that if, for instance, if a political campaigning group was trying to look to utilize this space, they would not be able to use it for that reason, because here's the problem with that. If, in fact, whoever was the person that got elected, ultimately, others could say that the town favored that person's campaign by letting them use the town facilities before they got elected. So we try to remain neutral as a town. That's why we have the neutrality, so for détente, if you will, type approach to those kind of things. I've seen it done other places, and it has been problematic. So the position that a lot of places are going to these days, at least from what I'm informed, is that they're just staying neutral and not allowing people to use it for that purpose. Use of the meeting room must require that a town employee be present. That's an insurance requirement, so that we don't always, we want to make sure that if somebody's in the building, that somebody properly secures it afterwards, or that the light and all the lights are shut off, and that somebody gets hurt while they're in the building, somebody's able to contact safety and to contact public safety, and to be able to have access to a phone, whatever necessary to reach someone. Those are just safety issues that were recommended to us by insurance folks. So those are just the thinking that went into this policy, and at this point, I'm just certainly welcome to get your feedback. This is not the final version, obviously, but it's our draft that we want you to all react to and give us a response.
We will open it up to you guys, but I want to have the board have some questions. So, anybody have any questions?
I did. When you say there has to be a town employee present, does that mean the custodian, or does that mean, are you going to assign a town employee to be here?
Well, for instance, for instance, on Monday through Thursday nights during the week, there's generally a committee using this room, right? So there's always a town employee associated with that committee, for nearly in every instance. So we always have somebody here in the building for that purpose. We would not assign somebody, so the person they would have to be in. The one that sort of comes to mind is probably the best situation is McGinty room, because dispatch is always there, police and fire are always in the building at all times. So therefore, that's less of a concern. This becomes a little problematic if somebody's not available after hours to actually be here and be present. Or for instance, if somebody wanted to use the building on a Saturday, it would have to be the employee that would have to be here voluntarily to help with a committee, et cetera, to make sure that the space is available. So
if you had, say, a private group want to come in and use it on a Saturday, and that no town employee is involved in that group, so you would have to have a town employee present, and who would pay for that town employee?
well, the person could volunteer their time if they chose to do it.
But if you have no volunteers?
If there's no volunteers, then you wouldn't be able to use it.
You wouldn't be able to use it, or would you require that committee, that group, pay for the town employees?
I suppose we could do that. I wouldn't be inclined to do that.
I've seen that in library agreements quite often. They'll have a closer that they'll pay for a private group. This policy clarifies, who may use it by saying that committees and nonprofit organizations where a substantial portion of the intended audience or membership is composed of town residents can use the town meeting space. Generally speaking, we could have an employee or a person who might be a resident that's on that committee, and then in that case it wouldn't cost anything. We didn't set up a fee structure. The idea was floated from McGinty. We have a lot of private people using that, like coming in and doing training. And we thought about, gee, that room gets a lot of wear and tear, and we have to replace the chairs and the rugs and all of that. And we thought about having a fee. And it came to our attention, first of all, the fee would end up going to the general fund, and then you'd have to reallocate it back to the building. Who would manage that? How would you decide who was going to get charged for what? And then we found out that a lot of these people who are for-profits that are doing the use of the McGinty are allowing us 1 or 2 free seats. It's basically public safety training. Today there was a DA training in there. So a lot of times they'll give us a free seat at a cost of a couple $100 per seat for one of our police officers, firefighters to use the room. So
Free training.
that's the way that, the only fee that I've seen exchange hands with regard to meeting rooms.
So those type of meetings there that aren't a nonprofit or a board, like the DA training, are those all geared towards fire, police, or,
Public service, public safety.
Public health, things like that.
I'm selling widgets and I want to get
Exactly.
everybody in a room to sell widgets with
Exactly.
me? Okay, all right.
Exactly.
Ginny, do you have any other questions? No. Jim?
Just a couple thoughts. For some reason, this kind of intrigued me, this new policy, so I probably did what you did. I Googled public use meeting rooms town, and I looked at probably about 15 different towns. Some towns are on the softer side. We encourage the community to come free of charge, and they want to draw people in. A lot of libraries do that, but probably about a quarter of the towns that I looked at was pro-public coming in and using it. I look at this as some of the way we used to do stuff. So the old town hall, we all had keys to it. I could use it on a Saturday to have a meeting there, or it was a little more casual. It was more welcoming. My concern is you walk into this town hall, once you get past the pillars and the echoing, it's not a very welcoming thing for small groups to come in and say, can I use some space here? And I've said it before, that the backbone of this town is on volunteers. So when I listened to who was on the subcommittees, and they were all town employees, was there anyone from the public brought into this to say, going through here, I see you need a $500,000 insurance policy, a bond, 30 days in advance. You can get kicked out if someone else wants to use it.
Or you can sign just a waiver.
Okay, so a Girl Scout group wants to come in.
Right,
It's intimidating.
Yeah, you wouldn't,
see
we
this.
wouldn't do that to
Yeah.
them, obviously.
Well,
Well, so they actually do.
Yeah, if
But you would. You would on this,
Yeah, they would
right?
need to add the
Right.
town as a
Yeah.
As
additional
insured,
insured
right.
to
So
use it.
my
And that's
caution-
because that's what our insurance company would require.
Right.
Correct. But then when I compare it to the other towns, they either don't have an insurance person pushing for it, or they've backed off a little bit and invited people in. I think over time, we're losing the genuine want for groups to come in. If I looked at this, after I get through the 2 pages and finding out all the stipulations that I can get bumped, I'll go someplace else. I think we need to have somebody from the public on here to get that perspective. I can see the fire and I go on the library website. It's pretty well run. You pick a room, they tell you pretty quickly. Some weird things that I didn't notice there before, all meetings that you have in the library have to be open to the public, things like that. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. It seems like you grabbed the more onerous things and put it on here and forgot about the softer side. I want people to feel comfortable to come into town hall. This doesn't do it. I understand the liabilities and, don't put tacks on the wall and clean up after yourself and all that, but it's intimidating. It really is. And if I was a small group and having to sign all these waivers, insurance policies, I wouldn't feel very welcome to come into the town hall that the town paid for. So I would just look at some of the other groups and look to their perspectives on how often they use it, when they use it, and put it into this equation a little bit. I mean, it's needed, don't get me wrong. The way the town hall was, everyone had a key. I'm surprised, it didn't get robbed more often. So there's a balance here, but I think we're way on the other side of this.
Fair enough.
And so some towns say right off the bat, no charge. It would be nice to say right in here, there's no charge.
Yeah, we
for it.
wouldn't charge people to use it.
Why would the library have a policy that all of their meetings are open to the public? Is it, once you're in a public building, would you expect that the public's open to come into your nonprofit group? Why would that even be on
That's a
this?
good question. I don't know, because there would be, because obviously there are times when that's not necessarily true.
And then, just so the library scene, the schools are separate. The library has their
They have their
working
own policy.
group, their own policy. It seems odd that the Council of Aging would be put into this, because they have their own way of doing things. A group shows up on a Tuesday in the middle of the day of Boy Scouts. Does that really fit into what their mission is, or are they part of this group? Because
I think what this was born out of is there is such, as you know, limited meeting space. And one of the alternatives for all of us, I mean, is we have used the Council on Aging now and again. We had to do an electrical aggregation meeting, and, you know, we used it. So we just looked at it as another opportunity for a space for a board or committee to meet at. But there are a lot of restrictions. As I said, the way the building is set up, they can't have a night meeting and their whole office is open. And there's a lot of confidentiality and private stuff that shouldn't be seen. So even though they're on here, they wanted to have some rules and regulations, and they wanted to offer, you know, be a part of the group, but it is harder for them to find space. They do so much programming already during
over
business
there.
hours.
Yeah, so that's why I thought it was odd that a group signs up, and there's a checklist, and I'll use the senior center meeting space on a
Yeah.
middle of the afternoon. It doesn't seem like it's a good fit.
Yeah, generally, this served a lot of our internal needs. We have a lot of competition for our own boards and committees who want to meet in different rooms on the same night. I mean, you've been to, like, times when AdCom can't get a meeting room, or, so this was serving, the reason we had an internal committee is we were trying to serve our own boards and committees who have conflicting night meetings, and where are they going to go?
So do you see when this is all done, on 0 to 10, is it going to be filled up to 9 with municipal space needs? Or is it really open to the public to come in? Just from your, I don't know your needs of the different departments and what have you.
It's difficult to say. I mean, we're still, right now, we're into the heavy meeting season, so it's really, we'll get an indication pretty quick. But I'll just tell you that the school committee actually wanted to use this room for their meetings, and it conflicts already with two other committees on Monday night. You've got this with the Board of Health and this Conservation Commission meet on Monday night. This board meets here Tuesday night, Wednesday night's AdCom, and Thursday night's Planning Board or Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's used pretty regularly, you know. The off night, of course, would be Friday night, but who wants to meet on Friday night? Nobody does. So, and Saturday nights and Saturday or Sundays. So, again, it's the reality of the fact that, you know, we created adequate space, but we didn't overbook space, or overcreate space, and so that's why we want to make sure we regulated it properly. Perhaps we did overregulate it based upon, the initial view of this, but that was by design, because we know by the very fact that we have a limited number of spaces that we can only allocate. So I think we'll go back and take a look at it, because that's the last thing we want to have is an unwelcoming feeling, because that's not what we're all about.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I understand it, and if that's your impression, then I want to make sure that we go back and look at that and see if we can soften that a little bit.
Right.
And just one last question. The issue of town employees being here. This board, and any elected board or any appointed board, under the ethics laws, we are considered a town employee under the same regulation. So when you say town employee, are you including us as those people, the elected and appointed officials?
Yeah, it could conceivably. It could conceivably. The problem is, if you're going to use just this space, then we would have to give, we're trying to limit the use of keys, because obviously for security reasons. We live in a different world today, so security is important. So we try to limit the number of the distribution of keys and access to the building for obvious reasons. So then it would become a question of how do we access the building, and how we would coordinate that. But that can be overcome. That can be overcome.
There's the advisory committee. There's no town employees. It's an appointed.
Well, Randy is.
Randy or Matt would
Randy or Matt.
probably be there. Yeah.
Well, Matt's usually here because he does all the minutes.
Yeah.
He does all the minutes.
That's generally a board or committee would have some sort of a staff person that is connected to it. And again, this was definitely born of our own competition. You wouldn't believe the boards and committees already asking to compete for this room. So that's why we met. We got IT to go on board. So this is sort of prototype right now, and we wanted to throw it out there and see how people felt.
Okay, and last, and I'll be quiet about it, but and Chris brought it up at the last probably meeting when we had to come in and sign documents, and the only time we could do it was during working hours because we don't have keys. It's a little ironic that your boss, this board, doesn't have keys to the town hall when we want to come in and use it. And if it's a security issue, I think I would challenge that if you can't trust the selectmen to come in on a Saturday without protocol.
The issue is not just the Board of Selectmen, Jim, is the fact that there are lots of boards who want keys. And I think if the question is, if we say no keys for boards, then we're being consistent.
Oh, no, I understand that, but
that's what we're trying
I
to
hope
do.
there's some thought into that, because I believe me, I work in a lot of towns, and the selectmen have the keys to come in, and there's a lot of off-hours meetings, and we just don't have the ability to do that anymore.
Understand.
And I'm not suggesting all the boards get it,
Yeah.
but there's a definite distinction here between paid employees and volunteers. And the line has never been more clear as it has in this last year with this town hall. So that's what I'm suggesting. So, and that's what I'm reading in this as well.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's all good feedback.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions. When you're talking nonprofits using the facilities 1 through 5, you're really talking just the public safety building, because everything else is used up or closed up at night, right? So do we have a list of nonprofits that typically use town facilities? And if we do, can you email that to us?
That's a good question.
Taking reservations
Yeah.
before. The library might be able to give you that,
Yeah.
or
Well, that leads me to my second question. So we
McGinty.
have
Well, McGinty,
a policy for these 5 meeting places, the 3 meeting places here at the town hall, public safety, council on aging. By reading this, does this mean library, DPW, and the school have total separate policies?
They have they have access policies, they do.
library has its
Meeting
own.
room policies.
I don't think DPW.
DPW, I don't think has one. You're right. They just have that small meeting space in the conference with the Water Commission meets in.
So with that being said, why wouldn't the town of Foxborough have one policy that covers all public meeting spaces?
Well, because you have different boards. I mean, for instance, the library trustees control the use of that
It's a
building.
town building, though.
It is, but still, they sometimes have different policies. They're a separately elected board that can actually have separate policies on how they want their building to be used. Because don't forget, they do, auction, art displays, and they do different kinds of public
Jazz concerts, things like
and
that.
readings and things of that nature, which is different what we would use here. So it would be a little bit more complicated to do it that way if we did it that way, if we tried it.
So I see how everything, like the schools are different and all that, but it's a public building, so I think it should be one public policy, and that's just my opinion. I do agree with a couple of things that Jim said, the key being one of them. But when you read off the list of people that were on this committee, I was pretty shocked that we didn't reach out. Every other committee I know of, there's usually a bunch of town employees and 1 or 2 citizen at large. I really think there should have been a couple of citizens representing the different groups that currently use meeting spaces, nonprofits or other groups, because I agree with Jim. This is, to approve a policy like this, especially like with this building being used Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, there's really no opportunity to use this building. So this policy really is for the McGinty room, is the way I look at it. which
Well,
a lot of groups...
Or the Council on Aging. The Council on Aging could be available, too.
Yeah, but I really think when you had this initial committee, there should have been some people outside of the boards, regular citizens that, maybe use these now, or, other nonprofit groups or other groups that use the facilities.
Well, I think what was really, the intent was to try and come up with a baseline policy that's being used in a lot of places, and some places a little softer, some places a little stronger. We try to put one in place that is reflective of what the organization is right now. We can go back and have other people weigh in on it. Again, that's the purpose of the public hearing, or the public input by the board and from the public, is to hear what people have as a concern.
Having no policy was becoming problematic for people. There would have to be someone on a department head level making a decision, yes or no, you can use it, and it was, you don't want to deem it as discriminatory. I'm letting you because I like your group, and I'm not letting you because I like your group. So we had an internal swell like, oh, what are you going to do about the town hall when it opens with meetings? Gee, we'd really like to hear about that because we'd like a policy. So that's kind of how it grew at like a department head meeting. It was really trying to help everybody get on the same page and keep us out of, trouble of being discriminatory. And then we discussed it at a loss control meeting with our insurance company, and they said, like you do with the recreation buildings, you always have to have someone sign a liability form, or name you as a second, name the town as an additional insured. So that's kind of how this grew. It wasn't to exclude, but that's why we're throwing it out here publicly, so we can get feedback.
If we can get, one more thing, Doug, if we can just get a list emailed to us of the last year, the nonprofit groups that have used these facilities, or any other group outside of a town board or committee, I would like to see that.
It would probably just be McGinty for the most part, because obviously we couldn't, a lot of people have used this building because it's brand new,
Yep.
but, and they certainly didn't use the old town hall because there wasn't any space available to do it anyways. So,
The library must be very well
library
documented,
probably has a pretty
because
good
when you
list.
sign up, you write
Yeah.
your organization, and
Yeah.
it's tracked pretty well.
yeah, so we can probably get, we'll talk to the library, we'll talk to McGinty, the public safety folks, to see if they have a handle on how many nonprofit groups have reached out.
Doug?
Yeah, I guess sort of things that come together a little bit for me, and that's, finding out some of the other groups that have used the room. It'd be interesting to send this policy to their chairman to see what their viewpoints are on the policy, send it out to half a dozen of those type of groups to get their feedback. But I guess coming full circle to, the public input, one of the things you did say early on is that you reached out to Dennis, and, Dennis, I assume, reached back with you, and it'd be real curious if we're done here on our committee to hear the input from the two gentlemen that wanted to speak.
Jenny?
Before you can, I just have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
What constitutes a bump? Because many years ago, I had a meeting with a group. I was trying to make arrangements for the McGinty room. First of all, I was told you couldn't book it the third Thursday of the month for the whole year. You couldn't do that. You had to do 3 months at a time. Secondly, I was told that sometimes you might be bumped with no notice. And the reason you were being bumped was because there was a union meeting, an emergency union meeting that night. And because of that, my group, we go to a private place and pay a fee every month. So we don't have to worry about being bumped or anything. But I was really taken aback that the fact that the union meeting would have bumped a scheduled meeting that had been the notice being given in the newspaper, and everyone expected to be able to meet there that night. So I would like a clarification on bumping, and where do the unions stand? Why do they get the ability to bump a meeting? It's not, if you had an emergency meeting of the police and fire, okay, that's a bump, okay, no problem with that.
Right, it's a public safety matter. Right.
But an emergency union meeting?
Well, that in of itself, it surprised me because there's enough places in that building where that could occur.
Exactly
It
right.
didn't have to happen in not necessarily
And
in that
most
room.
unions
Right.
have posting policies where they have to inform their members like 10 days in advance, so.
Well, it was when you called up to do the McGinty building, to make arrangements, you were told that, oh, by the way, you might be bumped. And that's why my group went, why should we bother doing that? We don't know from
Right.
1 month to the next whether we
Well,
had a meeting there or not.
What I envisioned bumping to mean is that it'd be a bona fide public need. You know, if we had a hurricane or we had a major storm that required that people use that room, or, you know, the emergency operations, it becomes the emergency operations center.
Exactly.
Those kinds of things. But, you know, I don't want to get into individual groups, one versus another, but I think what you have to look at is if that room is booked and that person, that group, I would view the union or any other group that as a separate group. And so if a group booked that room, they would have the right to use it unless there was a bona fide public need to bump it. I would view that. That's my view of that. So if there was a conflict with another group, I would view that as being, sorry, you're gonna, you know, the room's already booked. You can find another place in the building, I'm sure, to do that, or another town space
Right.
for that.
Well, I think that has to be, you're going to have to talk to the people down at the McGinty building about that.
Yeah, I'm not aware that's happened recently, but if that
Well, it hasn't
happened.
happened to me for 3-4 years because, like I
it's never
said,
been,
my
it hasn't,
group
now
is
you're no longer there, so.
privately.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, but certainly, I have a little different view of that situation.
So with that being said, that first condition, then we should kind of tweak the language a little bit, because I read it like, if I'm a nonprofit group and I'm using the McGinty room, and all of a sudden, the AdCom wants to meet there, then I'm out because it's AdCom.
Well, that would be bona fide use, though. If we had an emergency, if we have a.
It was an emergency, yeah,
Well,
but
well, not even that, Chris. I mean, if you have a town committee that needs to meet for a public purpose, say for instance, there was, you know, you're getting ready for a town meeting, and all of a sudden something came up just before the town meeting, you needed to meet, and that was the only space available. You know, I mean, I think there's enough effort that can go into finding other spaces, so that becomes less of a concern to me.
I just don't want it to be, you know, if
Willy-nilly,
we are
like,
opening it up to
yeah.
nonprofits to use, which nonprofits need space.
Right.
I don't want them to be kicked to the curb every time somebody decides, you know, I'm more important, you know, we have to have this meeting. I know emergency situations and stuff, but
Right.
they can't be going into it like, oh, well, we can just kick that group out, you know, just to have.
Yeah, I would want to know, that's why if a person you'll see in the policy that if a person gets denied the use of the space or gets bumped, it has to come to me as well. And so I have that, you know, sort of like final say over it, because I want to make sure that it's being done consistently and appropriately and fairly. Because that in of itself troubles me if we're just doing it because it's convenient. We wouldn't want to be doing it for that purpose, just for the sake of convenience.
Once this all eventually gets settled and we have a policy, who's in charge of the calendar? The
So
master calendar for all of these?
For each group, all of the town hall meeting spaces come through our office. So Caitlin has access, Pam, Bill, myself. If there's a conflict, Bill makes the tiebreaker vote. For McGinty, it's the administration, police chief and fire chief, their admins have it. And for COA, it's the human services director.
So there's no master calendar that you could look to see what room is available?
Yes, you can.
Yes, there is.
So you
There
look
is?
on, you can see, each of the rooms will have a column,
Okay.
and you'll see where the space is. It'll say for, you know, if it's not the one you're in charge of, it'll just say busy or not busy.
Okay.
And if you see a spot, you can
Okay.
request it. So we're working out that whole thing with IT. As we get a new website, it'll be a lot easier, but right now, it's working with our Outlook calendar.
There'll eventually be an app for it.
I hope so, yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay, I think the board is pretty much kicked it around. Dennis or Charles?
think the table mics are working in this
Yeah,
meeting,
you can
right?
just
So you
sit
can
there,
sit there.
Grab a seat.
Wasn't looking forward to standing, but I won't. Thank you. And again, I'm still Dennis Naughton, 4 Everett Lane. I've lived in town since 1971, and what Jim said touched the note with me. The sense that although that old town hall just went from bad to worse over the years, it had a certain je ne sais quoi about it that was kind of welcoming. And when you come in here, it doesn't feel like that. I assume over time, because it's new, that feeling will change. But I don't think we should develop a policy that will serve to reinforce that sort of not so welcoming feeling. And I had the same reaction that Jim expressed. I felt that it was not a welcoming kind of policy. I felt actually it was not a welcoming kind of policy at all. And I understand it's a draft. I understand it's not difficult to do this. Some of you know I served as a high school principal, and I know when you're trying to make policies, everybody wants to get into the act, and it's not an easy job. So I respect that. I have a couple of questions, though, that I want to clarify. And one goes to point number 4, fundraising, campaigning, solicitations. You know, one of the things that you always need to do when you develop contract language, I spent a lot of my life doing that and negotiating, you need to know what the definitions are of things. And the devil's always in those details. And nothing against Mary Beth and Bill, but people in offices change. I've lived in town long enough to know that there is some town administrator or other that I wouldn't want to have had making decisions about some of the things that are in here in Section 8 toward the end about what you had to do in order to go into a room. But, so I'm just concerned what fundraising is, okay? I'm here as an individual, but I'm also the chair of the Democratic Town Committee. The Democratic Town Committee has met for years in the McGinty Room. We've been bumped, things have come up, worked it out, managed to do it. And, you know, and it's a good meeting space because, frankly, a number of our members are older. And you all know, if you've used the community meeting room at the library, you know, you got to schlep that furniture out of the closet, set up the chairs, set up the tables, do all that stuff, you know. Some people are not that fit anymore physically to be doing that kind of thing. That's one of the reasons that we like the McGinty Room, because it's very easy to use, it's very easy to clean up at the end, and it's a nice-sized room for what we do. We don't do fundraising there, as I think anybody would define it, but I'd still like to know what the definition is. Campaigning, I don't know. I mean, like any political committee, and I would just say aside, we're elected by the citizens of this municipality as any other town committee is, like the Republican Town Committee is, elected by the citizens of this municipality every 4 years, you know, at the presidential primary election. And so when I read in number 8, any person or persons using a meeting room or rooms who's not a municipally appointed or elected committee, board, official, employee, etc., I asked myself, is a duly elected town committee, like Republicans or Democrats, automatically included as a municipally elected committee? And I'd like to get an answer to that tonight. How is that viewed by Bill?
I think that's more of a state committee, Dennis, as opposed to a municipal committee. Because the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committee actually work on a statewide level. And they represent the town at the statewide level, but it's never considered to be a municipal committee.
Well, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Because they are elected by the municipality.
They're elected by the residents of the community, but they're not a municipal committee.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we clarified that.
Yeah.
So then all of those other things would apply to Republican or Democratic Town Committee.
Right.
Certificate of liability insurance, posting of a bond, payment of refundable security deposit, et cetera. That would apply to us?
Well, there are several options there. In fact, you can have a waiver, indemnity waiver that could be signed as well.
Yeah. So, you know, so far, you know, in all the years, I don't think the Republicans and Democrats have broken up too much furniture. And I think that, you know, some of this, and I don't mean to be fresh, but some of this is a solution in search of a problem, okay? And I viscerally, as an individual, those kinds of things always bother me. And again, I understand that you're in a difficult position. I've served in administrative positions. I know how that is. But frankly, when I read this, for my group, some of whom are here tonight, I was feeling a little unloved after having lived in this town all these years. And I would like to see a policy that does not include the Republican, Democratic town committees or any other political town committee in the last part of that, in those stipulations. I mean, I suppose you could turn around and you could say, well, Dennis, somebody who likes to break furniture might be the chair at some time, you know, which is the reverse of what I said about you guys. But at the same time, it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel good to me.
Well, I think that the thinking there, again, is the political representation and serving and using town space for that purpose. The thinking is that towns are supposed to be neutral. We're not supposed to be party affiliated one way or the other. So we represent the entire community, not a particular party, one direction or the other. And I think that's where the problem evolves from, is that consideration.
Could I suggest a solution? Okay?
Sure.
You know, one way of imposing political neutrality is to open it to none. Another way is to open it to all. And I would submit that to open it to all would be a much more welcoming solution than to open it to none.
That's problematic too. And because I think if you open it to all, it can be, it's the rule of unintended consequences.
I don't like to legislate by exception, Bill, and that's what I'm hearing. I mean, so the American Nazi Party wants to use the McGinty Room. I don't think we need to consider stuff like that. I really don't. And I hate to say it, but they probably would have a right to use it.
Well, if you did, under this provision, under the provision that you just suggested, but that's if we don't allow for political purposes, then we stay away.
But I think that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I got to disagree with you there. I really think that it should be open to all and not to none. Because there really are Republicans and Democrats here trying to find a place. All right? I heard what Ginny said. I know what she's talking about. I've run into the same thing. All right?
I understand the problem. I'm not sure
why
this is the
penalize
solution.
something that happens 99.9% of the time for something that might happen 1% of the time? I hope the selectmen will consider that point when they come up with a final policy. Because, you know, it's, again, as an educator, I would welcome all people to celebrate all holidays, not, let's not talk about any holidays. It just seems to me like so anti what the country stands for. How did that get started? You know, it's just like, I don't know. But anyway, I know that other people want to speak. I think that this policy wouldn't be intended to exclude a town-based political committee that's associated with a state party and a national party. Wouldn't be excluding us from the McGinty Room or this room or any other room under this policy. That's not the intent, is it?
Well, I'm not sure. We talked about that earlier, that if this is a statewide committee using this space and not a municipal committee,
Well, it is a municipal committee.
it would be excluded. But if it's a municipal committee, then it clearly is not.
Well, it's both.
Well,
It's not one or the other.
Well, I
both.
know that's your perspective, but that's not necessarily like in the universal
Well, I hope
perspective.
that my perspective prevails in the policy, because I don't think that Democrats and Republicans and constitutionalists or whatever other parties are registered, you know, here as registered voters in this town, should all be excluded from using any public buildings in this community.
Well, if you go back to section number 1, it says committees and nonprofit organizations where a substantial portion of the intended audience or membership is composed of town residents may use the town meeting space when the room is not being used for town operations. Now, if this was a statewide Democratic or Republican state committee meeting using this space, I'm not sure that would be true.
Could you repeat that?
So if you had a statewide committee that was using this space, you wouldn't, that wouldn't necessarily be true, that the substantial portion of the intended audience and membership is composed of town residents.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, because as far as I'm concerned, you know, as the chair of the local Democratic Party in the community, we're not going to ask the state to come out and use the McGinty room. Nobody would fit. So it's not an issue.
Right.
But we fit, you know, and the Republicans would fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, once again, I think that's what we ought to focus on. I mean, let's not hide under the bed from something that's not there. And I mean, I got a strong feeling that that's what's behind this. And frankly, I have that strong feeling from conversations that we have had. I think that maybe in the public safety building, there's been some alteration of perspective in more recent times that might have focused on this. Because when you come down to it, it really is the McGinty room we're talking about. This room is never going to be available, you know, because of all the people who need to use it.
Well, we do have the other spaces in the building, too, not just this room.
Yeah, but what, it fit 8 people?
No, actually, some of them can hold up to 12 to 15.
How often does your committee meet, Dennis?
We meet once a month, Chris, yeah. You know, and in fact, we have the McGinty room booked through the month of April.
And at your meetings, do you do any political fundraising, campaigning, or solicitations?
Well, for example, at this most recent meeting that we had just last night, we had Josh Zakerman, who's a candidate for public office for one of the constitutional offices, to just address the committee and express his views and, you know, just kind of make himself known. I mean, this is what happens. You bring people in as speakers. We always have speakers, or almost always have speakers, but it's our meeting, it's not their meeting. That's, you know, that's the point.
And also, just, it's illegal. It's against the law, Massachusetts law, to solicit
Yes.
in public buildings.
Right, yeah.
You can't do a fundraiser in a public building. You
Right.
can't even say,
Yep.
you know, you can't solicit.
Right,
So-
I mean, in that sense, it's a redundancy to even include fundraising, because it is illegal in the Commonwealth to do that. Yeah, yeah. And incidentally, you know, I mean, we advertise our meetings. We are like the library. We're open to everybody. We're not just open to Democrats when we have a meeting. Anybody who wants to come can come.
How many elected residents are on the Democratic and the Republican committee?
We have 27 now. We're entitled to 35 under the state law,
And that's for both parties?
each.
Yeah, we're allowed 30, what'd you say?
35.
Yeah, we're allowed 35. We've got 32, but we have 40-something associate members.
Yeah, yeah.
But they all don't show up at the meetings. I can tell you that.
What's that like?
Okay.
I know what you mean.
All right.
So, I mean, I'll get off the stage here, but I mean, you guys have a lot to think about with this. And I think the number one thought should be, let's not legislate by exception, okay? I don't think the Ku Klux Klan's coming to town, and the Nazis are coming to town, and the commies are coming to town anytime soon. But the Republicans are here, the Democrats are here, they've been here for centuries, and they're going to continue to be here. That's what we need to think about when we're dealing with these kinds of things. What's
Good.
real?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Charles, do you still want to speak?
Excuse me, members of the Board of Selectmen and administrators of the town, my name's Charles DePompo, and I'm a newbie compared to Dennis. I've only lived in town since 1998. So one thing that I would like to focus on is this idea of voluntarism. That's one of the things that I really have liked about Foxborough during the last 20 years is the spirit of voluntarism in this town. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Boyden Library, and I really enjoy that. It's a wonderful group. But speaking for myself, if I saw this policy, and we meet in the Boyden Library once a month, the first Wednesday of each month. If this policy applied to the board, I'd resign. And I'm sure a number of the other people on that board would resign also, just because it's way too burdensome. It works well there. We meet once a month. We do great fundraising for the library, and it works. why mess with something when it works? A couple years ago, we did a film series at the Boyden Library called the Green Reel Film Series, and it was on sustainable living. It was a free film that we showed 3 times in the spring and 3 times in the fall. We were on a very, very limited budget, but we were able to get sponsors who would help us pay for the films, and we showed the films in the larger room at the library, and some of the films were very well attended. Again, if this applied to that Green Reel Film Series, we wouldn't have been able to meet in the library. We would not have had the funds. I am on the board, on the Democratic Town Committee also, and that is again, when we talk about what goes on during that meetings, whether it fits into one of the words, it's problematic. It very well could. I remember one meeting we had a couple of years ago, shortly after the tragedy where some of the students in Connecticut were gunned down. And it was a meeting on gun control. And somehow word got out that we were going to have speakers who advocated gun control in Massachusetts. Many, many gun owners from around the area showed up. And Dennis was in a very hot seat in terms of trying to control sanity in that room, because people spoke on both sides how they felt about gun control and what needed to be done and what shouldn't be done. And if there was going to be any situation where there was conflict, that was going to be it. But Dennis controlled the entire situation, and it was very well. In fact, one person who was pro-gun came up to me afterwards, because I gave a story when I was growing up in Maine. My father was a doctor, and a couple of kids were playing with guns, and one kid shot the other kid and drove up to my father's office. He was dead. There was nothing that could be done. He came up to me afterwards and said, "I'm sorry for your loss." That's what took place in that room, between people who were on really opposite poles on that particular issue. So again, these things work. And in New England, I think that's what we have, is the sense of voluntarism, getting involved in local government. And when we think about what's going on in the country, the distrust of government, the people who don't want to get involved, let's not spoil that. Let's not ruin that. Voluntarism in New England, whether it's the town meeting or serving on boards, it's a wonderful aspect of living here in New England and in Foxborough. And I would just recommend that we just don't do anything that would cause people to stay home and watch TV, and this is go play golf. Bill is a great golfer. So again, sometimes good intentions result in bad results. And when I think of the Constitution, the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, it says, "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the right of people to peaceably assemble." It just seems to me with this policy as is, if it was implemented, the costs that are imposed on assembling in public rooms in Foxborough is a lot like the poll tax, is a lot like the poll tax in order to vote. So that's all.
So I would like to correct you. We're not charging for this room.
Fees.
We're not charging any cost for these fees.
Well, no, that's not true. That's not true, because if you have to get an insurance policy, that costs money.
Here's the way to address it. So let me address that.
Are insurance policies free?
Let me address that. There are lots of organizations who have insurance policies already. And so what we're saying that if you already have an insurance policy, all we're asking is that we be named additionally insured in case something happened in the building while you were using it. So that's the basis of that. So there are plenty of situations. The town common gets used all the time by folks who don't have insurance policies, but they sign a waiver saying that they assume responsibility in case anything happens. We have an obligation as a town, because the town is ultimately liable in the event that something happens. So I'm speaking purely from a town manager's perspective, there is a responsibility that we have to invoke here.
Oh, I understand that. I appreciate that.
So that's where I'm coming from on that.
Right,
now,
I appreciate that.
With due respect to what you said, we never intended to make this an uninviting policy. Now, and that's why when making policy, it's like making sausage. You put a bunch of stuff in there and something comes out. And it may not be the right thing at this point in time, but that's why this is a presentation to the board. The board gets to give us their feedback. We get to hear from folks like you, which is, everybody here is trying to do the right thing. I don't think there's any question about that. But I guess I want to be clear about a few things, though, that are being said here tonight. We're not looking to try to make this uninviting. We are trying, however, to make, when you don't have policy, you invite challenges and problems. So we live in a world today where it's my obligation to tell you we do have to have some level of policy here to regulate how facilities are used for the public safety purposes, for the liability of the town, and to make sure that it's a fair process. So we just don't allow people to get bumped for the sake of getting bumped, or for people to utilize space inappropriately. So that's the reason, the whole gist of coming up with this policy.
And I understand that, and from an administrative standpoint, I totally understand that. But looking at it from a citizen volunteer in Foxborough over the last 20 years, I think we have to be very careful that we don't let the administrative parts of it outweigh and overcome the citizen input from people who pay taxes in Foxborough, who live in Foxborough.
No question about it.
And who want to be involved in local government.
No disagreement.
So I think that's the balance that we all have to try to gear towards. So I would just respectfully suggest that in coming up with that balance, that if we err on the side of volunteerism, in terms of civic responsibility, in terms of being involved in town government, that's all I would like.
All in favor of that.
Can we clarify, there is not a fee for you? We do not expect you to go out and purchase insurance or to pay a fee to use a room.
If you don't have insurance, obviously, we understand
the
that.
Boy Scouts of America, your association has a policy. We've done it with our Eagle Scouts. They just endorse the town.
Well, see, I would say it's not so much the cost, but it's what would inhibit civic responsibility, civic involvement. If some of the language in here, if it says that if something should happen, during one of your meetings, and whether it was negligent or intentional or non-intentional, you are liable for that. That's going to inhibit civic involvement. People are going to say, why do I risk my house or my car if somebody falls and hurts themselves and they sue me? I could lose my house. It's not worth it. I'm going to stay home. So that's the concern that I have is policies may be good, there may be good intentions, but just think of what the possible consequences are relative to civic involvement. Okay,
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Anybody else before we wrap this up? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Now I'm giving the McGinty room as an example. When you call up to make arrangements to have a meeting, and you have a group that meets every month, third Thursday of the month, so you're going on for a whole year, why is it that you can't reserve that third Thursday of the month for the whole year? But you can only do it like every 3 months, and then you have to apply again for the next 3 months. The problem with that is if you're a group that meets consistently every third Thursday, what happens on month 4 when someone calls up and goes, hey, I need the room for the third Thursday? They're going to say, you know what, it's free. It's open.
So I think...
And that was another reason why my group went...
That question came up.
That was another reason why my group went to a private group, a private meeting place.
One of the reasons...
The consistency, the non-bumping, and, so we would know what we were doing.
One of the reasons that we heard from both police and fire chiefs was that with the lack of state training money, a lot of in-service training now has to happen here, in-house, in Foxborough. So if they were booked someone out every Thursday for 12 months, and they have to do a 1-week in-service Monday through Friday for their staff, they'd be displaced on that Thursday because of a town committee when it's actually, we need it for public safety and service training. So that's why they like to do it in chunks of 3 months so that they know what their in-service schedule is going to be. We do, that room does a ton of daytime training.
Yeah, but our meeting is in the evening.
Right.
I
don't know if they're doing night shift training
at the
as well.
library, and they looked at it, this was years ago. We had a nonprofit that we wanted to book out, and simply, there are, how many, 17,000 people in the town? For one group of, say, 5 to book something every single week for a year. There's other people that need the room, so they're trying to find a balance.
It's a balance.
You can't monopolize your group over somebody else's.
Chris?
Doc had a question.
Just one more last comment, and I understand the concerns about overregulation, but I firmly believe that a policy is definitely needed for the rooms. And, while we were sitting here, I just Googled the Boyden Library, and I'm looking at 15 guidelines that most people probably don't know that the Boyden Library has. And they're the same guidelines that are very similar to the ones we have here. I didn't get a chance to look up the McGinty Room yet prior to this policy. I assume they have very similar guidelines also. I'm reading right here. Meeting rooms are not available for commercial or fundraising programs or activities other than library groups. So similar programs are in our other meeting rooms. I mean, I think to have a policy here for our town hall is just as important as the library has and probably the McGinty Room has.
Mark, you just said for fundraising. In other words, you can't go in there to raise money. We have used, when the McGinty was shut down to us for a long time, we used the library. They have no anti-local political committee rules.
Just what I wanted to say was, they all have rules. They all have guidelines.
Sure.
And the town hall has to have them, just like all the other meetings.
Well, Lee says this particular set of rules seems far overreaching.
All right, so this is the first time we've seen this as selectmen. This is the first draft of the policy. I think we've kicked it around enough. We've heard concerns. We ourselves as a board have some concerns, so where do we go from here?
So what I would ask that the board members, if they have particular changes that they'd like to make, please get them back to us. And we'll put them back into circulation for consideration. Ultimately, you're going to approve this policy, so you have to feel comfortable with this. That's how this works. So my obligation is to give you the information that we see as issues, maybe a little bit far overreaching in terms of the administrative side of it, but that's where we come from, and that's the area that we come from. Now, having said that, ultimately, you can decide if you think that the use of the room for political purposes is fine with you, and if it is, then you can say yes to that. If you're not okay with it, and you see the challenges that could be considered with that, if in fact the rule of unintended consequences applies, that's something that you can consider too. All we're asking for you is that this is, like I said, it's like making sausage. You put stuff in, and at the end, ultimately, something comes out which we hope we all can live with. And I think the input, and I really appreciate the input tonight. I'm just as passionate as all of you are when it comes to doing my job, but the thing is that we want to make sure that I clearly get the message that we are not, under any circumstances, trying to make this uninviting, because this building was built by the community, and it has to remain that way. I feel very strongly about that personally. So, but not having a rule and regulation in place or a policy in place opens that discussion, open the situation up where things happen, where sometimes we can lose focus that this is public space and we should use it for public purposes. And that's why I think we want to try and look at that. So I fully appreciate that input, and we'll go back and look at that again.
If we go,
It's a good discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Jim's good.
That's just on that same vein, if it is geared towards the taxpayer and what have you, is it too late to put someone's from the Moms Club or someone from a group that's outside?
No, not at all.
To be on the committee, or two people on the committee, so you can hear that perspective.
Absolutely.
The people that don't have insurance, the people that are struggling to even get some space.
So we can find a way to work around those concerns.
So you listen first and foremost to the concerns in your committee.
And tell us what the issues are that they see as issues. So happy to do that.
Yeah,
No problem.
I was going to say, the next time we do anything like this, make sure we have somebody outside. Maybe you can grab a couple of people off of that list of nonprofits that have used the McGinty Room. Maybe somebody from Democrat or Republican committee. Dennis?
Just want to quickly say that, when the town was sold on funding the public safety building when the town was sold on funding the new town hall. You know, there's always an argument, we need meeting space, and this will provide meeting space. And that's what people understood when they voted for these things. That's what they still understand. And I think would take it ill if somehow that was pulled out from under their feet.
And I don't think anybody's intentionally trying to pull anything, but it's a public building that has to have a policy. I mean,
No, I understand that.
So
I do.
we'll get there.
I mean, the balance we live in this world today is that there are a lot of things going on in this world today that didn't happen just 10, 15 years ago. So we have to be very conscious and so almost a little bit more on the, you know, if you would call it, but just that we have to be very careful in how we prepare these things because we live in a different world, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate to be able to say that, but it's the truth.
We need to push back and try to get our old world back as much as we can. 9/11 happened a long time ago.
All right, I think we've kicked this enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, everyone, for the input.
All right, next up, Selectmen's update. Our chairman, in case you notice, is missing. He's home with the flu.
Yeah.
Talked to him earlier, he sounded pretty ill.
Yeah, this doesn't sound good, unfortunately.
So, Jim, Ginny, Doc, you got anything?
No,
for us?
got nothing.
Okay.
Right.
Manager update?
So just a couple things. We're in the middle of budget season, so we're working very hard to try and pull pieces together right now. So the season of meeting with the AdCom is upon us, and so we're meeting with them during the day as well as at night to go over budgets and to come through that process. I just wanted to say, I hope that the chairman feels better. When I talked to him earlier today, he did sound really, really rough, and hoping he's feeling better tonight and gets better soon. Just three people that I want to just give a shout out to, and that is, I mentioned Bill Caspara's name earlier, but I also Deb Spinelli and John Hannon are all retiring from the community. Deb and Bill have already done that. John will be retiring by the end of this week. And I just want to say we appreciate all their time and dedication to this community and the service and they've provided to us as a town. I appreciate everything that they've done, and we've worked hard to try and fill the vacancies left by those folks, but you know, those folks will always have an enduring mark in the community as well. So I wanted to just say congratulations to all of them, wish them long and healthy and prosperous retirement, and that we wish also the new folks that are joining us the best of luck in their new roles as well. That's it.
As Bill said, we're meeting with all of our departments, with Randy, Bill, myself, with every department on their budget prior to the AdCom meeting. So those are happening and very, very interesting. Wanted to congratulate the Orpheum on their ribbon cutting dedication opening on Saturday night. That was a really nice event. A lot of hard work by a lot of volunteers. And it's great having that resource. My family, my daughter was always involved in community theater. In fact, she performed at the Orpheum through Bay Colony at one time, and it's a great, great thing for the community. We continue to roll out our customer service program. We have 2 more training sessions scheduled for January 22nd for all of our employees. And then at the end of all the training, we're going to be putting out survey cards, et cetera, to the community to find out, get their feedback on how we provided service to them. We're looking for ways that we can reward exemplary behavior for our employees, recognition, ways of recognition. Then we're just working hard to implement all of the FY18 contract changes that occurred at the recent town meeting, working with the police department on performance evaluation training. And we'll be implementing an online performance evaluation with our steelworker group made up of about 60 people. So doing a lot of things to implement contract language that we negotiated over the past couple of years. That's it.
Just one last thing I wanted to say before I tell you, I just want to wish the Patriots good luck this weekend. They're playing in the divisional championship at Gillette, and hope that they carry on the tradition of winning and continue to march towards another Super Bowl for this community. So.
Erica, we were updating the vehicle policy in regard
Yes.
to
Yes.
logos, so where are we on that? I thought,
We were in the process of trying to get, there's been a lot of transition with people handling that with all the changes in police and staffing. So we're looking to pull the committee together and meet with Municipal Graphics. So that's the next step, where we need to meet with them so that we can have the template for all the
Right.
vehicles that we all agree to.
On that note, can I just, without offending anyone, this is something that was brought up a long, long time ago by a selectman.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of discussions, and we were told, oh, that should only take a month or two.
Mhm.
It's what, almost a year now?
We agreed on the template, we just have to find the
But
person that's going to make
The
it.
whole, let's do a study committee, let's bring
Mhm.
people in, let's do it,
Mhm.
versus, let's just get it done. There's a big gap here, and it's,
Mhm.
how many times have we brought this up?
Mhm.
It's Ginny's war cry. Some people can say it's a small thing.
Mhm.
But in context to how many committees and how much study and how much graphic to put a logo on the side of a vehicle, because it has to balance with the police and the fire. Is it that complicated, or is it just
No.
everyone too busy? And I'm not,
Yeah. No, I
you
think
guys are
it-
doing a whole bunch of different
I
stuff.
think we
but-
met in the summer, and we all came up with a template. Ginny was there. We had a student work on the design for us. We all agreed to it, and then we moved into the new town hall, and that was, the meeting room policy had to happen, and as well as the vehicle policy. So, yeah, we're cleaning those things up right now.
I mean, what's important is we're getting new town vehicles,
Mhm.
and,
It'll be coming up in the spring.
Yeah, DPW has one, so that's why
Right, and-
it's imminent.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
right, and the impetus was the town vehicles should be identifiable to the taxpayers that,
Agreed.
Mhm.
and that was the idea of doing
Yeah.
the logos, but it has taken.
Yeah, and it wasn't anything controversial.
time.
We all sort of agreed on the context. We just have to,
We'll just push hard to get it done.
yeah.
It needs to get pushed forward and get it done.
Okay. Anybody have anything else before we move into action items?
Just as the budget comes, I know we talked about this in nauseam over last year, but what is the direction to department heads? I know we're not level spending, but are we saying the term level service?
Level services. So what we're trying to do is if you have, we're trying to look at folks and say, look, if you have funds in your budget that you want to reprioritize to use for a new approach, that's entirely up to you. We give them that flexibility. I'm still seeing requests for additional staff members because folks we're still light in some areas that need to be in. Plus, we're expanding certain services. For instance, in water and sewer, there's expansion of services going on there. So there's need for plant requirements for plant operators, things of that nature. So we need to look at those. I'm still trying to balance that against the fact that we want to make sure that we're not going too far in terms of adding more that actually takes us away from that level services approach. So that's still the direction.
Question.
Sure.
When do the warrant articles, when can people start to submit warrant articles?
You can submit them now. All right, so they're not due until, what's the closing?
15th
February
is the
15th
closing, yeah.
is the closing date.
But-
February 15th.
Okay,
So
and
you can submit them now. if
At
they want.
the joint meeting that we had with the selectmen had with the school committee, the CIP budget and CIP policy was
Yep.
brought up. And can we maybe put on
An
the
article.
agenda as an item to discuss the possible changes and the concerns
Yep.
of people in regard to the CIP policy? Because that would have to be, if the word change is made, that would have to be through a warrant article.
Correct. So as I understand the issue, and as I think Sean McCarthy had raised this as a member of the AdCom as well, that we'd like to, at least the conversation I heard was that we want to try and get folks to, and we wanted to try and expand the committee to have additional members on the committee. and to also have limitations that anybody who voted on an article would not be, they couldn't vote on somebody within their own department. So I think those are the two primary
Yeah, my
things that I
concern is
heard.
like the makeup, who
Yeah.
comprises
Who
the...
comprises the committee?
Wasn't it also Saturday morning meetings too, Ginny? Was that
That was one of the, yeah.
As opposed to meeting on Saturday versus a night meeting?
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that a Saturday was a tough time.
But that's not, the meetings, that's not a town, that's not like something that would come under a warrant.
Oh,
It's
you-
the-
yeah, you
it's the
could- yeah.
composition of
Gotcha.
CIP,
Okay.
that was the concern.
Yeah, the committee itself is defined in the bylaw, so we have to change the bylaw to reflect that change.
Yeah.
But the
Saturday-
time is another concern, too.
Yeah, but the Saturday morning meetings just turned out that seemed to be the best time, easiest time for the most people to meet.
And I think it's, having gone to last year's, you need 4 or 5 straight hours to go
Oh,
through
yeah,
the
it's an
whole
all-
process.
Yeah, it's a 4-hour, 4 or 5 hour
Having it
process.
at a night meeting would be tough.
Right.
Yeah.
But with the technology that we have in this meeting space, I don't see any obstacle to tape it. Because I think that whether it's happening on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Thursday,
If we had it right in this room, we could tape it easily.
I
don't
think
see-
that's the biggest, there's a huge amount of money spent with very few people doing it. At the very least, put it on cable so people can understand it.
Yep.
And it's a process, so maybe somebody won't watch it this year, but they get used to it. In 5 years, it becomes an expectation, you can see it.
I don't disagree at all. I think it's, I welcome the openness of the process, because if anybody thinks that we're doing things just on a whim, that's just, I just think that takes it puts us in a bit difficult position to sell things to the community. That's not our approach.
I'm not
It's not our
saying
approach, yeah.
you're doing things that you
Well,
shouldn't be doing, but when you
yeah.
get a very large
Absolutely,
expense that nobody knows about because they weren't there on a
Exactly.
Saturday, and then they're hit 2 months later when it's, at the last minute, there's a big gap there. Had it been on television or have these meetings on television, people understand it earlier.
And I agree with that. I think people should know that what we're acting on,
We have the
because,
ability to televise them now, too.
yeah. I don't disagree. In fact, I feel strongly even about the meetings being televised, but all the meetings being televised, but that's not my call, so.
Well, not to keep it, whose call is that then? Is it a selectman call or is
No,
it a
well,
town
it's
moderator
actually
call?
the moderator's call with the finance committee.
No, I'm talking about CIP.
So CIP, well, as far as the CIP meeting, that's a good question. I think it could be, because it's my committee, effectively.
Yep,
So
good
that's a
call.
different discussion, yeah.
So can we all agree it's going to be televised?
Yeah, and if
Fine
we
with
have
me.
to, if we
Fine
have
with
to
me.
put it in the wording of the bylaw, put it in the wording.
Well, I don't think, that's something you wouldn't, we don't put that in any of the,
Yeah.
for televising.
Yeah, but if it's your
but I-
committee, then it's ultimately the budget that the selectmen have to approve.
Is it the will of the board that you'd like to see that televised? Because I'm
would.
fine with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I think the more that people see it, see the process that we go through, I think the better it is.
I would like to see every meeting that is happening in Foxborough Public on TV.
Well, I mean, that's a...
Keep cable access busy.
But it's a volunteer, cable access is a volunteer board, you need volunteers, but
Right.
like, for instance, the CIP, not the CIP, the AdCom, probably not our call. It's an appointed
Correct.
autonomous board from the town moderator.
Right.
I would love to see it, but we don't have jurisdiction over that.
Right.
Right.
Understood.
Yeah.
I misunderstood when you said, talking about the CIP committee. Okay,
Get it on TV.
works for me.
All right, we're rolling into action items.
Move to approve a one-day entertainment license for Motorcycles of Manchester, Inc., doing business as Mom South, for 1/27/2018, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for their open house.
They're actually requesting the 27th and the 28th. In the,
Yeah, and the,
under actions items, it just says one
wine and
day,
malt.
but actually in the, if you look on the application, it was, there
Yep.
were two applications, the 27th and the 28th.
Yep, I'm going to revise that.
There's two applications.
Oh, one, yeah.
Well, one is just entertainment on the 27th, and the other one is, looks like a one-day alcohol license for 2 days. right?
No,
27th and 28th?
yeah, if you look on the, there's 2 applications actually on there.
Yeah, 27th is for
entertainment.
entertainment, the 28th.
Yeah, no, the 27th is entertainment, in the 28th.
Is it in that,
If you
Yeah.
pull up the,
Yeah, the two one-day entertainment licenses.
entertainment licenses. yeah.
Okay, and then the next one is 2 one-day
Right.
alcohol license,
Yep.
okay.
So just-
okay, I'm going to revise it.
Yeah, just add the 28th.
Yeah, move to approve a one-day entertainment license for Motorcycles of Manchester, Inc., doing business as Mom South for 1/27/18 and 1/28/18 from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for their open house.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None?
Move to approve a one-day wine and malt beverage license to Motorcycles of Manchester, Inc., doing business as Mom South for 1/27/18 and 1/28/18 from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. for their open house.
Second, but, second, but I just have a
Okay,
comment.
discussion?
Yeah, when you check the application, if you go down to the last, the end of the application, we give them the liquor regulations.
Mhm.
Those are the liquor regulations from March 8th, 2012. It's not the revised ones from last year.
Okay, we'll correct that.
Well,
Yeah,
this
we'll correct
happened a few applications ago, the same thing.
Yeah, we've just got to get rid of that
Lisa
that regular.
mailed the hard copy of the new
Yeah.
one to
Right.
all the licensees.
They all have the new one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so-
but
But
I
they're
mean,
referring to the
this should
wrong.
this should be corrected on,
We should just get rid of that old one and just get rid of the, so we'll take
yeah,
care of that.
okay.
Bear in mind that we're still working through some of the changes in the office with the, so that's, but everybody has the new regulations, period. So,
Under discussion, do you know, like with this event, looks like it's a 2-day open house and they're looking for an entertainment license and also a beer and wine. Do we know if they're selling beer and wine or part of their open house is you go there, you get a wine or a beer?
It's not clear. It's
Okay.
not clear to me.
I guess it doesn't matter either way.
Yeah.
I don't know if it does, but we should add that to the one-day applications for things like this. You know, will customers be buying or will you be giving away
Yep.
beer?
Yeah, but if we do it for the Orpheum, they're selling beer and wine, aren't they?
If they're selling beer and wine,
They're
yes.
selling beer and wine.
So what's
Does it
what's
say-
unclear here, it's not clear whether or not they were selling it in this
If you
instance.
go to an open house,
Yeah, they may just give it out.
Participate.
And there's no license requirement if they just give it out. That's what you're referring to, correct? There's no license
yeah,
requirement if you just.
and
say-
it's unclear on this application, what,
Right.
are they selling beer and wine to the customers or is it an open bar type of scenario?
Well, it wouldn't just be beer and wine only, obviously.
Right, but it's still, if it's free, it's open bar, right?
Right.
Beer and wine.
So do you think that should be one of the questions on the application? Is the alcohol to be sold? Or,
Is there, I mean, we've never asked this before.
Yeah.
Is there a difference? If you give them a liquor license,
Yeah.
whether they sell it for $1 or $100 or give it away, what's the difference?
Well, I mean, the thing being is, if you're giving it away, I mean, can you legally give away alcohol in Massachusetts?
You can.
Okay.
You can. Yeah, you can do that. The issue is, if you charge for it, then you have to get a license because that's the regulation. That's the only way we can regulate it. If they give it away, there's no,
So we can assume then, where they're applying for a license, they're charging
They're charging.
for a beer or
Yeah, that's right.
wine? Okay. Okay. So motion made, second, we had discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
Move to accept a gift donation in the amount of $90 to the Council on Aging for half of December's Tai Chi class from the Friends of Foxborough Seniors.
second?
Motion made, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Move to approve two one-day all alcohol licenses for All Pro Tailgates, doing business as First and Goal for 1/13/18 from 5 PM to 12 AM, and for 1/21/18 from noon to 12 AM.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Move to accept a gift donation in the amount of $50 to the Council on Aging in memory of Jim Shuard and Phyllis Will's daughter, to be used for programs at the Senior Center from Joy Trip.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Move to accept a gift donation in the amount of $10 to Foxborough Fire, to be turned into the gift account in memory of Richard Lehman, from Rita M. White.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Move to accept a gift donation in the amount of $50 to Veteran Services from Helen Olson.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor?
Aye. Move to approve the change in the street name of Valley Forge Road to Valley Forge Way.
I'll just give a little background on that. What it turns out is that apparently a change was made at some point in time, but the actual deeds say Valley Forge Way, all the people that live on the street. And so we actually communicated with everybody on the street, and their preference was to put it, make it Valley Forge Way. So not sure how the street was named Valley Forge Road. At some point it was made an error. And so we're trying to correct the record now. So the only person that can do that is the Board of Selectmen.
Then it doesn't have to go to town meeting where we accept new roads?
So
or
the
anything?
street commission is named the streets. So that's you.
So is there consensus on everybody that's
Yes.
on that?
They filled out
I
surveys.
didn't fill out a
It was
card,
unanimous.
and everybody did it.
I always thought it was Valley Forge Way anyway.
Yeah.
All the deeds say way.
Yeah.
The neighbors prefer way.
Yeah.
Somehow along the way, the
Not sure how,
town, their
but-
tax bills now say road, and the street sign was
Says
ordered
road.
as road. So it would be a change back to our internal process to change it to way, but the deed and the plans, the original documents say way.
This makes it
So
consistent.
we'll now order 2 new street signs based on your approval, and the tax bills, the assessor software, Vision, and Munis will both change to say way instead of road. In some ways, on the tax, it says Valley Forge Road, and then there's like way, in a margin. It looks like it might have been a
An error somewhere.
data
along the
entry error somewhere.
No unanticipated
Yep.
consequences for
No.
for changing
No,
it?
especially
No.
where we notified everybody on the street to make sure, because we wanted to make sure before we did it, that there was no unintended consequences, and everybody responded back, filling out the card saying, please change it the way.
So did a person on the street bring it up, or did
Yes.
you guys, or someone on the
Yes.
street?
Somebody brought it on the street, brought it to our
When
attention.
the street sign was put up and said road, and it was like, wait a minute, I always lived on way.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so so this is the way to correct it.
Okay. So the motion was made, seconded, we discussed it. Yeah, you seconded it, didn't you?
Did I second it? Well, I'll second it again.
Okay. We discussed it. Any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Move to approve, I'll do them one at a time. Move to approve the Board of Selectmen minutes for 11/28/17.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Any edits, clarifications, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye. Move to approve the Board of Selectmen minutes for 12/8/17.
Second.
Any edits, comments?
Is this the one that was, I'm looking for the one that had the discussion on the emergency, the 2 buildings that we're looking at? Is that the next meeting minutes?
No, it's that one, I think that we're on. That was, yeah, the Semerick one.
Oh, yeah, it's on the next one.
The one,
It's the 11/28/17. When the executive director came?
yeah, so that's the one we're looking at now?
Yeah.
Right. I just wanted more description. I mean, that whole topic came up of the second building, there's very, very little mention of it. It just says 2 sites. So if we can give some more information on what that second site is,
Sure.
a paragraph, just It just documents when it came up, and
Yeah.
I know we're waiting for the,
That actually did get
Valuation.
approved, so the money did get approved by the state, so we're moving forward on that now.
on the second
The
site.
evaluation of the second site. So we had to wait for the state to approve the use of the grant in order for that
Oh, for
purpose.
like a feasibility study?
Yeah, the feasibility
Okay, so
study.
that's
So
what got approved to
Yeah,
study
we're
it? Okay.
moving forward on that now.
All right. Yeah, so if we could just give a more description of what that site is and
Okay.
with the name to it.
So did we already approve
Rob
those
Rob
things?
can help you with
We haven't approved 1128 yet, have we?
Yeah, we did. That was the first one we just did.
So we have to,
Oh, okay.
I had my notes, but I just couldn't find them fast enough.
so we have to re-vote on that.
Make a,
Move to disregard.
what's the proper way to do that?
We want to put it back on next week's agenda.
Move to reconsider the vote taken on the vote to approve.
Move to reconsider the vote on the Board of Selectmen minutes for 11/28/17.
Reconsider it to be taken up at next meeting?
You can just take, you got to reconsider
We've
your
got to
vote first.
reconsider it
Oh, okay.
first.
Yeah, and the person who made the motion has to be the one that
Right.
Yeah.
reconsiders it.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor to reconsider? Aye.
Right,
So
so
now it's
the motion would be now to postpone action on 11/28 until, for further.
Oh, no, I
or
think
to-
we can motion to
or to-
approve it,
Subject to.
second, and then under discussion, those are the revisions, then we
Okay.
accept it
Yeah, that's fine.
pending.
you want to do it that way, or do you want to wait till it's redone?
Oh, God, no, I think.
You just want to
Amend.
amend the minutes to include a greater description of the second problem.
Perfect. Okay, move to approve the 11/28/17 minutes with, say that again, Bill, the,
To provide a revised, or to amend the minutes to include a greater description of the second site.
perfect. So
Second.
moved.
Second Semarek site.
Right.
Second.
Motion made, second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Move to approve the 12/8/17 Board of Selectmen minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Edits? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the 12/12/17 Board of Selectmen minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the last thing that's on the computer agenda, we're gonna try to get a meeting, Bill, next week?
Yeah.
And have that be an actual meeting. I was talking to David today about it, and then Bill, we just want to have Bob come in and give us more clarity on not coming in all the time.
You
for
want to have a
Mondays.
special meeting for that topic, or do you want to just have a meeting, or chairman, town manager, and...
However you and
meeting?
David decide you want to do it.
A full board meeting, or do you want to have just a meeting one-on-one with Bob to try and figure out, and then bring something back for the board's consideration?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Well, I mean, we need to get it done before the 20th of January.
So you've
The
got some
approval.
time. I mean, you've got,
You have a holiday Monday.
However you and Dave want to figure it out.
I thought they were going to apply for a...
he is. The problem is that you still haven't got the deed, right?
Deed on it, yeah, there's
Yeah.
a couple quirky things.
So he brought me up to date on that today. He said they're still trying to finalize that piece.
Yeah, and, you know, when this all of a sudden just appeared, I mean, I went off my agenda.
Yeah.
Doc printed
Well, it
his
didn't
this
even have
morning,
it.
and it's not even
Yeah,
on it,
sorry
so
about it.
it's
It's
a
literally,
pattern.
it did come in today. It did come in.
Pattern of, you know, last minute, so
Okay.
just want clarification, you know.
sense.
And I want to make sure we get it done in time for 120, and I
Understood.
think Dave's tracking the same thing, so,
So I'll speak to the chairman tomorrow and see if we can get...
Yeah.
For how he wants to handle it.
yeah.
The board will have to meet to approve, at least three of you will, in order
Yeah.
to approve that license.
Well, one of us can't, so four of us.
Right. Okay.
Just keep in mind, it's a
Very good.
holiday Monday.
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody, good night.
Anything to sign?